Do it.
I'm Arya Schwartz, and welcome to the Winsidr Show, where it's all about the W. Today, we're talking winners and losers of WNBA free agency. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. I'm here with Matt Ellentuck of SB Nation, a good friend of the pod and of Winsidr, and we're talking about winners and losers of free agency. Matt, this is going to be a decisive topic. I know we're probably on the same page, but I feel like there's a lot of people who are going to disagree with us. And welcome to the show.
Yeah, disagreeing is fun.
It doesn't happen enough in the W. I feel like everybody just wants to be like, "Oh yeah, no, that player's great. That player's great," because there's a concern that if you criticize a player in the league, that you're kind of lessening the league. Well, I think we both agree that criticizing and comparing and what we're not saying that these players aren't deserving of being top tier athletes, of being professional athletes. We're just comparing it like you would in any sport.
Yeah, I mean, this free agency has given us so much room to talk shit about everyone and anyone because so much is happening literally at all times. And I think it's the first time maybe ever. I heard Lindsey Gibbs say this too. We're like, we have bad contracts now. Like we're at a point where we're like, actually, this contract sucks. And you're like, wow, we've never had this. Like this is fun.
Oh yeah, dude. The not to throw shade, but the Bria Hartley contract. What is going on? What?
Uh, Good for Bria, get paid.
Oh yeah, get that bag. But like, what were they thinking?
I could not tell you at all, but it's fun as shit.
Yeah, no, I've freaking enjoyed it. I mean, I haven't slept for 2.5 weeks or whatever, but besides that, it has been amazing. So I don't actually know if we're recording a pod right now. I might just be completely, hallucinating this conversation.
What?
So But let's start with a positive. Let's talk about the winners of free agency. Um, I'll list a team and give my thoughts. I've broken it down to what I think three teams are kind of the biggest winners of free agency in my opinion, and I'm curious your take on it. Let's start with, for me, one that was in the news today or yesterday, depending on when you're listening to this episode. But the Connecticut Sun, a lot of ups and downs through this free agency, a lot of wheeling and dealing. They get Dwana Bonner, so that was obviously, in my opinion, she was the best free agent out there. No shade to Skylar Diggins Smith, but they also lost Shakina Strickland and Courtney Williams. To me, though, adding Bonner and Breon January, I think this team is fine. Now, we were saying right before we started to record, if they kept Courtney Williams and added Dwana Bonner, I'm looking at this team to, in my opinion, and maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, I'm looking at them as the favorites. Maybe not the clear favorites. I might say that every once in a while, but I'm definitely looking at them as the favorites to win the championship this year. Talk to me about your thoughts of Connecticut at this back and forth free agency period.
Yeah, I think everyone's going to be a little hesitant because obviously breaking up that core five is going to make people a little bit uneasy. But I mean, I think they still came out with a net win, right? Like getting Dewana Bonner is the biggest move of the offseason, even if it came at the cost of losing both Courtney Williams and Shakina Strickland. And I mean, losing Shakina was going to just be a salary deal. Like that just wasn't going to work financially. And losing Williams came at no fault of Connecticut's. It sounds like she just sort of wanted out. So I think they did the best with what they could do. And bringing Brianne January isn't a loss. Like I don't think they really are gonna suffer too hard in the backcourt when you consider that they're bringing in maybe the best wing available, probably the best wing available.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I mean, if I'm a huge fan of Courtney Williams, and this isn't like at all in any way, shape, or form a comparison of the two. But if you're gonna go from losing a all star, a talk of the town, I mean, the only negative I see as far as like the overall picture, like you were saying, I think it's still net positive. The only net negative that I would say is marketing, because if there's anybody in this league that is going to bring eyes to your team, it's Courtney Williams. And yeah, you're missing out on that now, and I'd say that's honestly the biggest loss, and if that makes sense. I don't want it to sound like I'm coming at her game at all.
No, I mean, obviously, listen, hardly anybody in the league talks more shit than Courtney Williams, so losing that edge sucks. But I mean, the team still has maybe the best 3-4-5 combination between Bonner, Alyssa Thomas, and Jonquel Jones in the entire league. So like, they'll be cool. I wouldn't be freaking out at all. Like, I think they still got better.
Yeah, and no, they definitely got. I mean, look, I find it hard for anybody to add Dewana Bonner and lose 2 players and still not be off better like that. I'm that hyped on Dewana Bonner
Yeah,
and
January,
thinking like,
who's can
yeah,
stretch the floor. She honestly might fit better than Courtney Williams did in Kurt Miller's system.
no, she might, and that's the craziest thing. I think people are getting all hyped on it, but are like, oh, Connecticut fans obviously love Courtney Williams, so I think it's just an
We all do.
adjustment period where they kind of have to realize that.
Yeah, I think. Listen, Courtney Williams is a great player. Gaining Bonner is better than losing her. It's better than keeping her and keeping the same team, I think.
No, I completely agree with that. I mean, we don't need to get into this, but I do think there's clearly some bad blood between Courtney Williams and Kurt Miller. Like, let's be honest, the press release announcing this 3-team
At
trade,
least.
there was, oh my god, dude, I am here for all this drama because look, I don't know what's going on behind. I hear rumblings, but when a team trades a player who is such the face of the team and the vocal leader of this team, and there's no thank you, there's no we wish you the best. It's basically just veiled shots and then veiled shots coming back from Courtney. I am there for it. And let's be real, like you said, Courtney's talking the most crap in this whole league, and you're gonna try and do a veiled shot at her, thinking she's not gonna fire back. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's great, honestly. It gives a little behind the scenes look at what really went down. Obviously, Kurt Miller felt the need to explain why he traded away the face of his franchise, so I get why he did it, even if he didn't do it in the best way, and then Courtney defended herself, so there's definite reason to watch Sun Dream games this upcoming season.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, like, let's be real, the Nikki Collin and the Kurt Miller connection has always been, rainbows and butterflies, and
Mm.
finally now with the transfer, Bentley went from Connecticut over to Atlanta, and there was still butterflies and rainbows, but now you take Courtney Williams and Shakina, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more of a East Coast rivalry there, the I-95 rivalry, if you will, and I'm all there for it. Let's move on to a next team that, in my opinion, has won free agency, and that's the LA Sparks. They did not lose any key pieces at all. If anything, they've just continued to bolster and fulfill issues that they had this past season. I mean, Brittany, a lot of people are talking about Chrissy Tolliver being a big move, and I think she is a big move and definitely solidifies this roster. My only question mark, as it were, is this is a team that has big name star power in Candace Parker and Christy Tolliver, who are on the tail ends of their career. So for me, the bigger move is bringing in Brittany Sykes. Having the ability to have her on the team, that athleticism, that speed, that ability to get to the free throw line really hypes me up on them. Talk to me about LA.
Yeah, I like what the Sparks did. A lot of teams were in the running to sign Chrissy Tolliver, and it was going to take a max deal to get her. And I think the Sparks had no choice but to pull the trigger and do it because, yeah, this is it. I mean, all of their top talents, for the most part, are going to be free agents next year. So this is the time. I mean, you have Candace, Aneka, and Chelsea under contract. You bring Christy, who you know fits with that group together because they won a damn championship 4 years ago, and I think it makes sense. It's obviously a risk since she's signing a long-term deal and she's 33 and she had health problems for a good portion of last season, but you got to go for it. And I really do like the Brittany Sykes trade also because Kalani Brown just wasn't going to fit in the rotation again. It was going to be the same problem that Derek Fisher had last year. So moving her for a piece that can help you win now makes total sense. So I like what LA did. I hope it works out for them because if it doesn't, next year's going to be messy, but I see why they did it.
Oh yeah, I definitely everyone should keep their eyes on LA because if it doesn't work out, like you think last year was messy with some of the things that you kept hearing rumblings about, just wait for this year when you add in another star power, another vocal person in Brittany Sykes. I just think it's going to be interesting time. I believe it's we should start calling them the Showtime Sparks, but that's just me.
I
Um, any final thoughts on LA before we move on to our last winner? Unless
I
you want to
really
add
like
another
that they
team.
brought TRP back. That was like a
You like?
it's a little subtle thing, but bringing TRP back, I love. I loved her when she was in DC. She's tough.
No.
She's a tough.
Yeah, no, she's tough, and honestly, losing Lena Beard,
Yeah,
having that issue and to be able to to fill in somebody who can do that shutdown defender role. I'm a big fan, and I'm curious your take on this. How do you feel about players who kind of have a singular defensive minded role, filling a spot on a roster? Because I'm a big fan of it.
yeah. I mean, for her, it makes sense here, right? There are going to be times when someone's shot isn't falling, and listen, Christy Tolliver is not a good defender. So if it comes to a point where either she's hurt or she isn't hitting her shots, and it's time to plug TRP there to lock somebody up, like so be it. I think it's a smart move.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's move on to my last team as far as winners of free agency, and that's the Atlanta Dream. Now, a lot of people might say, "What the hell are you talking about, Ra?" But for me, Rachel and I have talked about it a lot on the pod and a lot off the pod, where this team 2 years ago amazed people. Last year, disappointed, angered people, for lack of a better term. And I think a lot of it came with complacency and a little bit of, oh, we've been here. We don't need to put in the effort necessarily that they did the year before. So, what did Nikki Collin do? She said, we got to clean house. We got to start wheeling and dealing. I love saying wheeling and dealing. It's just fun to say. And making moves to get, there was a lot of move. You lose Brittany Sykes, you lose a couple other players. There's some question marks of what the hell are they doing. But to come out on the other end, I mean, obviously free agency is not done yet, and I would not be shocked if they make a few more moves. But getting Courtney and Shakina are huge for this team and add the shooting that this team is really lacked.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Dream are the biggest winner of the entire offseason so far. They really stole Courtney Williams today is the thing. I mean, they didn't give up all that much to get a really star guard in return, and I also love them taking, a chance and moving Brittany Sykes for Kalani Brown. I don't think that we should overlook that part of it either. They took a player who was in the final year of her contract and got what was she, the number 7 pick last year? I mean,
Something like that, yeah.
Brown could be a real impact player as a 6'7" center. We didn't really get to see her much in LA, but she's gonna get a ton of playing time in Atlanta. I love that move. I love the Strickland move just because she was such a solid piece to what Connecticut did, and she's an elite shooter, and I think she makes a ton of sense. And hell, I mean, signing Glory Johnson for a year, I like that too. Why not? I mean, I think Atlanta moves clearly into the one of the final 2 playoff spots, in my opinion. I think they're a playoff team now, and I didn't think that yesterday.
No, I hear you on that. I mean, yesterday we recorded a pod and we were talking about it, and we put Atlanta on the bottom feeders as we called it. But no, I agree with you. This catapults them into a position where you expect them to be in the playoffs. When you have a top pick like Kalani Brown, when you have a proven veteran like Lori Johnson, and then you cannot sleep on Tiffany Hayes, assuming she's still with the team. I'm not trying to start a rumor there. I'm just saying you never know with the way they're moving. But to have Courtney Williams and a plethora of other talented players, I think they're definitely. I wouldn't consider them championship contenders or favorites in any way, but I definitely think they've brought themselves into the discussion of playoff expectations. And that's definitely something good. Is there another team we left out that you're kind of thinking about that should be included in winners?
I mean, I still think that the Mercury are a winner. Even though we're gonna obviously have to talk about that Bria Hartley contract because I don't know what was happening there. But being able to take a player like Bonner who was on her way out and turning that into Skylar Diggins can't be overlooked because convincing the sign and trade to happen, whether that was just by CBA luck or Bonner's demand, regardless, I mean, that's massive. Being able to get some return for a player like that, which wasn't guaranteed for other teams. I mean, the Mystics lost Christy Tolliver for nothing. So for them to be able to get picks in return and take those picks and turn them into Skylar Diggins is huge. And we're still, waiting to see exactly what the Mercury's final roster is going to look like. But I did like them also getting involved today and dishing Brienne January, who we knew probably wasn't going to fit in that rotation now with so many guards, and making the deal with the Dream also and filling out the depth there with Breland and Coffee. So I like what they've done, even if I don't like Bria Hartley's contract.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you stated there. I mean, I think my gut reaction is to not call them a winner just because they lose Dewana Bonner, and but like you said, they were going to lose her. So if at the end of the day they're losing her and getting something in return, then I guess we can't call that necessarily a
And
loss.
that's something is Skylar Diggins Smith, so that's not a
True.
weapon.
No, that's a very valid point. That was honestly that whole move was so freaking confusing with the picks going here and going there, and it's the draft pick usage. It's
The
something that I've always been curious about. Is there's no real value in draft picks in the W.
it's
It's so different than other leagues,
Yep.
and the amount of draft picks that have been moving around in this free agency period is boggling for a lot of people. I think.
Yeah, it's something I've thought about writing also. I don't It's weird, like, you see teams that are on the rebuild, like Dallas, right, who is just stockpiling so many picks that it doesn't make much sense. In a normal league, you would see a team with that many picks and be like, "Okay, one of these years they're gonna use those to, parlay into some other massive player or whatever," and, like, that's just not gonna happen here. There's so few teams that hardly anybody else is rebuilding and wants those picks. Like, their value isn't that high, and, I mean, we have first round picks that get cut all the time in the W. So, I don't really know how it's gonna work.
It's confusing and interesting, but I'm excited to see how it works because they're not just gonna sit there with their hands under their butt. All right, let's talk about losers real quick. For me, it's pretty simple actually. When you talk about the two first losers in my mind, Indiana and Minnesota. And the reason they're losers to me is because they legitimately made no moves. Yes, they've re-signed a few players. I mean, Minnesota hasn't even done anything. But just all of these other teams in the league, like we've been talking about, even if they're the bottom of the pack of the league, are still making moves, adjustments to get to that next level and be winners, or at least take a leap from not a playoff team to a playoff team, or not a contender to a contender. Those two teams have not done anything. Obviously, I think there's a belief that Minnesota's kind of punting to next year and hoping, hey, we can develop the roster that we have now, and we're not going to win it anyways this year. But then the following year, we'll have some cap space to really make some moves that other teams can't. Indiana, similarly, is kind of doubling down on their current roster. What's your reaction? Would you agree that they're losers? Do you think that I'm being too harsh?
I mean, we still have the period before the draft, obviously, when teams will make their final moves before the season. But yeah, the complacency has to be a little frustrating, I think, for both franchises. Obviously, we know the Lynx were involved in trying to get Skylar Diggins Smith, and ultimately they didn't feel like 3 first round picks was the right price. And that's frustrating to a degree, I think. But they've both these teams have also avoided paying players who didn't fit too much money, which I think has maybe been a trend among some other teams that have tried to become contenders. So they have to be satisfied that they haven't overpaid somebody that didn't deserve it. And these two teams might come down the line next year and be like the suitor for teams who can't pay the players they have on payroll. You look at teams like the Aces who are just stockpiling so much talent who they can't pay all of next year, and they'll probably have to get rid of one of those pieces. And maybe Minnesota becomes that team that's able to poach a big talent for a cheap price just because there's only 12 teams in the league and there's hardly anybody else to trade to. So maybe this works out in the long term. But yeah, for next year, I don't really know how Minnesota is going to fill out the rest of its roster. I think most of the free agents that are going to make an impact are pretty much been signed at this point, and they're going to have to just bank on Nafisa being even better than how outrageously good she was last year, and Sil Fowles, keeping up her health. But I don't know who they play at point guard. If that's Lexi Brown, we haven't really seen too much of her yet. That's going to be a big role for her. I don't know. There are a lot of questions with both teams. They're obviously both building towards the future, but teams should be a little frustrated that they haven't seen a single move yet.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I do think that Lexi is going to be starting this season. That's just kind of my gut reaction. But I'm curious to see who they're going to pair her back in the backcourt with, because Like, we know her as a shooter, as a straight baller, but we don't know her as a passer or a facilitator. Is that an aspect of her game that we just haven't given enough minutes to see that, or she hasn't been asked to do that? Or is it just, you know what, we need to fit a different piece in here and figure out where that goes? It's going to be an interesting season for the Lynx, as far as it's going to be very different, I think, than even the last 2 years, which I think most Lynx fans would agree were disappointing. But I think it's going to be different. There's going to be signs of hope for this franchise. Indiana as well. I mean, Indiana's in their own different situation. The last two teams that I have, real quickly, in the losers of free agency, and this is going to be a ridiculously hot take. So first, Chicago Sky. I think they're a loser because they didn't really make too many moves. They're kind of sitting there as a team that maybe before free agency kicked in, you might have talked about being a championship contender, obviously assuming that Diamond Shields makes another leap that we've seen from her. But for me, losing a Stu and not necessarily gaining some outside talent. I don't want to call them superstar teams, but there are like 5 superstar teams in this league. So I just find them a loser only because of what other teams have done and it being hard to keep up. And the last one that's a really ridiculously hot take for me is Las Vegas. And the reason I view them as a loser is honestly just based on what they've done as far as their obvious stated goal for growth. They are doubling down on this idea of, now we're not going to shoot the ball, we're not going to spread the court, we're going to just drive to the paint, and we're going to play classic Bill Laimbeer physical basketball, and we're just going to beat everybody into submission.
Yeah. I mean, I'll start with Sky. I think they were one of the unlucky teams, along with the Lynx, to want a key player and not get one, which is really frustrating. I think because that team felt like it's almost there. It's missing one piece, and maybe it's replaced by Diamond DeShields coming out and being the top 5 or so player we think she's going to get to at some point. Maybe this is her year. But yeah, they didn't really get better at all. I think losing a Stu was weird. I don't really understand the process of not wanting to pay her now when you have Quigley and Vandersloot at their peaks. I don't also really understand the Katie Lou Samuelson trade either. I thought that was a weird trade for both teams. Essentially, what Chicago did this offseason was take a Stu, trade her to Dallas, and then hope Azare becomes what a Stu already was. So I don't really get what the logic there uh, really was. And they sent a pick along with Katie Lou down to Dallas. So anyway, that just was a mess to me. So we'll see what Chicago has, but I think it's going to be a lot of what last year was, which is good but not good enough. And Vegas, I'm in agreement with you. I think I was so excited for this team's growth. I think at the very end of last year, we saw what they could be at their peak with Kelsey Plum running the point. They were fire. I mean, Asia Wilson wasn't even having a great postseason, and it didn't really matter with how good Hamby and Liz Cambage were. I mean, this team has so much talent, and I don't really get why they took all the problems from last year, ignored them, and said, "Nah, fuck it, we'll just sign Angel and see what happens." I mean, that's sort of what it feels like. I mean, Angel's a great
Yeah.
player; she's a great scorer, but she does all of the things that Vegas doesn't need her to do. I mean, they need a floor spacer. They need to find a way for Asia and Liz to work together in tandem. And what this does is just add another person who isn't a good 3-point shooter to the mix. And then even more confusingly, they signed Danielle Robinson, which who again, great player, but doesn't fit that team at all. She has the same problems where she isn't a shooter. So, it's going to be very easy for these teams with big centers who are able to switch and guard in space like Seattle and like Washington, and they're going to prey on the Aces because they're not going to have to even move much. It's going to be really clunky. I don't really see how it works, and I don't know how I am if I'm a star player on the Aces seeing this move because it just takes away shots from players who already get them in those areas.
No, I completely agree with you. I'm happy because I think a lot of people I've seen on social media have just been raving about how, oh, look at this star-studded Las Vegas lineup. They're amazing, this, and that. And for me, I'm just sitting here scratching my head like, is this team really ready or able, even, not even ready, able to compete against Connecticut, against Seattle, against Washington or LA. Like for me, I view them truly as like a fifth to sixth place in the league. When if you get someone who can space it, who can shoot it from behind the arc during this free agency period, I think they easily bump up to a top three team.
Yeah, I mean, them signing DeWanna Bonner would have put them as the favorite by far, but I don't know. I don't really see Bill's vision. We don't see eye to eye on most basketball related things. There's a reason why he has his job and I have mine, but just logically, I don't see the sense of it. I don't even get who they're gonna start. Are you gonna start Jackie Young and Angel McCautry in the same lineup? I don't know how that works offensively. Uh, I don't know. I have a lot of questions about the Aces. I'm definitely excited to see them play. I hope I'm wrong. But I think that they took all of their issues and like triple and quadruple down on the same ones for this upcoming year.
I completely agree. Well, that's all we got for this episode. Thank you, Matt, for joining us. Why don't you let the folks know your Twitter handle and where they can find you?
You can follow me at Ellentuck. I will have plenty of takes on the Fever's new 6'10 center, who is the only person I care about right now.
Boom. There you go. Well, thank you for joining us. And as we always say, we believe the players of the W and its community deserve the same in depth analysis and respect that men's sports receive on a daily basis. With that in mind, please consider joining our Patreon community to help support us and the hard work that we do.